Bruce Feldman is with us now, New York Times bestseller. He is also with The Athletic and Fox Sports at Bruce Feldman CFB on Twitter. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Welcome in, Bruce. How are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. Good to be on with you.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk with you. We're going to get to some college football, the USC spring game, but you've also done some really good work on the NFL draft. And you do this every year where you talk to some of these guys. Some of these are NFL coaches that you've talked to for The Athletic. And I don't know if it was entirely representative, but I saw a tweet you sent earlier where talking to different NFL coaches about the draft and the wide receiver position, which is really deep this year, and they all, to a man, seem to rave about Jamison Williams.
Yeah, it surprised me a little. Not that obviously he didn't have a great year, but you have the two guys at Ohio State who are very talented and super productive and what people have described as very high floor guys. You have Drake London, who's a big receiver who makes a ton of plays. You have Trey Burks, who plays in a different kind of system, but everybody loves his athleticism and his toughness. But Jamison Williams, one of the coaches I talked to, and for this piece that went up today on The Athletic, it was all from NFL position coaches as well as NFL personnel people. And when they talk about his explosiveness, and they are talking, it's rare to hear somebody evoke the name Tyreek Hill when you're talking about just a dynamic, explosive athlete. That was what how they view him, that he is that special. The other thing that was really high praise, an NFL scout I talked to said the player he reminds me of in terms of competitiveness, and when he said competitiveness, he goes, I'm talking about what I'm seeing when we go to practice on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday, was Michael Thomas at Ohio State. He goes, Michael Thomas raised the level of everybody at practice when he was at Ohio State. And Michael Thomas obviously had a terrific NFL career. He's not the same kind of athlete. He's a bigger receiver, certainly nowhere near as fast. But when you're talking about that kind of intangible with Jamison Williams, I think people who probably are saying he's just a speed guy, like he's just a deep ball guy, are really maybe missing the boat on him.
And Bruce, 7 receivers could possibly go in this first round. And you look at Christian Watson, he's a guy from North Dakota State, so not a lot of people have seen him play, but he's big, he can fly. What are you hearing about him?
Yeah, I mean, size, speed guy from North Dakota State really stands out. There was a little hesitation from one of the coaches I talked to. He was like, there's some stuff there where, like, why does he not catch this ball? It bounces off his face mask, or, there's different parts where it's like, hey, he has a ton of athleticism, and you can get better catching the ball. And this particular coach talked about one of their own players who's a bigger receiver who struggled and said just really wasn't natural catching it, and said, in this particular example, said he went a year without dropping a pass in games. So he said it can be improved, but he's going to have to work on it. And that's the part where it's a little different. And also, that's good football in the Missouri Valley. It's by far the best FCS league. You've had a ton of really good players come out of there. But for a receiver going up against some of the defensive backs there, it's certainly not like he's a receiver in the SEC going up against the secondary people you would at that level. So that's a little bit of a hesitation as well.
Bruce, have you talked to anybody that likes this quarterback class at all?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of guys who basically people feel like have second round grades, and everybody has some kind of flaw. People love Kenny Pickett's intangibles. They think he's really smart. They think he's a good leader. He's a pretty good athlete. But his hand size is so small that a couple of the quarterback coaches I talked to go, it's not like it's 9+ where it's small where Joe Burrow's was. It's outside of Michael Vick. There has not been a quarterback drafted high who has had hands this small. And he said it does matter in weather. He had 38 fumbles at Pitt. That's a big number. Granted, he played a long career there, but cold weather, you talk to NFL coaches, they said that is a concern. You get to a guy like Malik Willis, obviously started his career out at Auburn, huge arm, good athlete, comes from a very college-heavy system that Hugh Freeze does with RPOs. They worry a little bit about the mistakes he's made, turnovers. Matt Corral, there's some off-the-field issues. There's some concerns about will he hold up. He's tough as can be, but he is not a big guy, and if he's going to try to take on linebackers, even though he was in the SEC, the NFL is a different animal. So all these guys, Desmond Ridder, there's serious concerns about, is he accurate enough to be a really good NFL quarterback? So it's to let the buyer beware. This is probably not the year if you need a quarterback in the first round to be trying to pull one out of there.
It's great. Bruce Feldman is with us, Fox Sports, The Athletic, at Bruce Feldman CFP. Go read his, subscribe and read his articles, not just about college football, but about this draft as well. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Every time, though, we have this conversation about Kenny Pickett's hands. And look, I get it. I mean, there's a reason, I guess, a quarterback hasn't done this since Michael Vick. I also go to the fact that with the 16th pick one year, Buffalo drafted E.J. Manuel out of Florida State, in large part because he had big hands. And there's a lot of crappy weather in Buffalo. So I don't know, Bruce. And I don't know if Kenny Pickett makes it or busts it in the NFL. I have no clue. The NFL doesn't know. They can't get it right most of the time. It's just amazing to me how they have these criteria. They have these windows these players have to fit in when it's been proven time and time again. Just because they fit in those windows doesn't make it work.
Yeah, no, you're right. Look, I worked on this QB book. I sat in while Johnny Manziel was getting ready for the draft in San Diego. And also in the room with us was Logan Thomas from Virginia Tech. Logan Thomas's hands, he could probably lift up a suitcase with his pinky and his thumb. I mean, he has enormous hands. He could throw the ball through the wall. He's playing tight end in the NFL now, though, and he's pretty good at that. So it's just, I think they are, the college guys get it wrong a lot. The NFL guys who have more invested in it, they get it wrong a lot. It is not an exact science at all. It's going to be interesting. I think Kenny Pickett will probably be a pretty good NFL quarterback. The question is, if he is Andy Dalton, is that, are you taking an Andy Dalton-like career in the top 10? Probably not. Are you taking it number 20 if you're the Steelers? Maybe. I don't know. So it's just like, it's a crapshoot, for lack of a better term.
Hey, shift into some of these spring games, Bruce. Starting with USC, watching that yesterday, outside of them having a semblance of a crowd, they said 33,000 plus, maybe not that many, but much bigger than a typical spring game at USC. It also looked like they had cut the grass and maybe pressure washed the Coliseum. It looked a lot nicer on TV for whatever reason.
You know what? It has gotten nicer in the last, if you haven't been out to USC in the last 3 or 4 years, and honestly, if you're a football fan, you probably didn't have reason to be. They have upgraded the facility significantly. And I think Lincoln Riley was a terrific hire for USC when they pulled that off. And there's been a lot of positive signs. That program has been in the ditch for a while. Thankfully for USC fans, through the portal, you can get better faster. They are going to be very active. They already have been, and they're going to continue to be. Caleb Williams is really good. Everybody came out of there buzzing. Knowing guys on that staff that I talked to this weekend after the spring game, I think they were very encouraged. They think they have a chance to be pretty good. Now, the question is, pretty good, out here in a very watered down Pac-12, pretty good could be 10-2, 9-3. That's certainly a strong year considering you were god awful and nowhere near a bowl team last year. But it's also, you got to pump the brakes a little bit, out here because there are definitely some people who are going, yeah, they could make a run at the playoff because Caleb's that good. Well, the defense is not good. The offensive line is average, maybe a little above average, but it's not like they don't have Drake London coming back. I don't think there's a number one receiver. So they're a work in progress, but people are definitely buying in on the West Coast. And I think the recruiting is going to be interesting to see because there is a lot of genuine enthusiasm for USC right now.
Bruce, did you ever go to one of those carnivals where you play the games and the guy would say, okay, for $1 you can win a prize in this area. For $5 you can win a prize in this area. In college football right now, it's like if you're at a level of, say, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, you can complain about NIL in this area. But if you're Jimbo Fisher in Texas A&M, you can complain about portal tampering up in this area. I mean, Jimbo Fisher was questioning whether or not there's tampering going on because people hit the portal and announce their destination almost at the same exact time. Do you think there's tampering? Is it a problem? Is it anything you can do about the way the portal is working right now?
Oh, yeah, there's definite – tampering's been going on for a long time. It's more widespread now. I mean, I've talked to numerous coaches who said, and they will identify a specific program and say, this coach has talked to our offensive line. We have 2 offensive linemen who are pretty good, and they're talking to their high school coaches. Hey, would he want to come here? Like, that is definitely going on. And I don't know what you can do to stop it. In the case of Jimbo Fisher, like, if you come out and say it, does that guilt anybody into doing anything? Are you going to be able to get text messages from an actual call? Like, it's usually done on a third, or I don't know if it's even if we would call it a fourth party, if it's like 2 removed, but that's usually how it happens. I don't think you're going to stop it, but I remember having a lunch with a coach who was off for a week and was out in California. We were talking about one particular recruit, and they felt like they had a connection to this kid as soon as he went in the portal, but he was already off the market. And I think that between the NIL pay, there was another, very coveted receiver recently who was like, basically his phone was kind of disconnected. I'm kind of done. The bidding is set at this price, and coaches knew it. And I think it's just taken a leap times 4 because of the NIL component that has gone with the portal. It's an interesting kind of combination as it's worked out. And I get where Jimbo Fisher is frustrated. You don't think that's going to happen? Like, Jimbo Fisher signed this amazing class with a incredibly deep defensive line haul. They're not all going to be able to play right away. Don't think that the recruiting has stopped just because signing day passed. I think all coaches are savvy enough to know, they're going to be recruited even when they're in uniform.
Yeah, I mean, some people thought that he was pointing at Texas Tech when Baylor Cupp just got in and went straight to Texas Tech. But I'm like you. I think it's more to players who haven't left yet, who could be coming down the road. Louisville fans were doing it. Were saying that when Tyler Harrell committed to Alabama at the end of last week. Do you think this is a problem for programs like the Louisville, Missouri level? Or do you think we've got tampering that goes on, or at least interest? I mean, I would understand, okay, if my son was a receiver at Louisville and wanted to catch balls from C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, right? That's going to help my stock. But moving from elite program to elite program, I don't know if that's going to happen as much. You think Jimbo was talking about other elite coaches maybe?
I think he might be, because there's definitely examples I've heard of where guys have jumped in the portal and actually haven't been in there very long, and they've already made a decision, that there was something. Now, I don't know that they're recruiting necessarily off his roster. He felt like he didn't have a fair chance to make a pitch at somebody. I honestly don't know, which specific example has probably drawn it the most out of him, but he's definitely not alone. And I've heard of plenty of examples that what goes on is the group of 5 situation. You have some good players who started for a couple of years in your program. Maybe they were all elite. And then their high school coaches are getting calls from Power 5 coaches to say, hey, would you want to come here? And I think that's hard for a lot of recruits who maybe they weren't on a big stage to say no to. So I think that is a definite reality that is going on. And I just don't think it's going to slow down. I think it's going to only speed up.
All right, do all of these things. Go subscribe to The Athletic and read Bruce's writings about the NFL draft. Follow him on Twitter at Bruce Feldman CFB. Go buy his books. He's a New York Times bestseller. He mentioned the QB book. He's got many, many more that you can get right there at your favorite place to buy books, bookstore, online, wherever. Bruce, we always appreciate the time. It is great talking with you.
Me too, guys. Have a great week.
All right, buddy, you too. Bruce Feldman with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.